there friends, it's Ashley here from the Loopy Lamb and theloopylamb.com, and I'm back this week with another pattern for our Amigurumi Advent Calendar Crochet Along. This week we're going to be making a frilly little doll skirt, and it's just really fun, and I've designed it so that way you're not having to attach yarn in a bunch of different ways. It's all made in one piece. To follow along with today's tutorial, you're going to need a worsted weight yarn in your color of preference. Today I'm using We Crochet's Brava worsted weight yarn in the color Seraphim. And then you're also going to need a 3.5mm or E crochet hook, or whatever hook that you've been using for the duration of the crochet along in order to match gauge. You'll need a sewing needle and thread in a coordinating color, a 9mm button, a stitch marker, a tapestry needle, and a pair of scissors. So if you're ready to get started, please hit that like button and consider subscribing to this channel. I'm going to clear this away and we can get ready to get started making our frilly doll skirt. To start our skirt, we're going to need to create a slip knot, and we'll do that by wrapping the yarn around our fingers, bringing that first loop over the second loop and pulling it tight. And then we'll place that onto our crochet hook and tighten the yarn to our hook. To start with, we're going to need to create a chain 40. To do that, we're going to yarn over and pull through the first loop, and that's our first chain. We'll yarn over hook and pull through again, and that's 2. We're going to repeat these steps until we have 40 chains. So now that we have our chain 40, we are ready to start with row 1. To do that, we're going to start working in the 7th chain from the hook. We never count the yarn on our hook as a chain. We're going to start here in this first chain here, and we're going to count over 7. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And now we're going to work a single crochet stitch into that 7th chain from the hook. So we're going to insert our hook into the chain, yarn over, and pull up a loop. You should have 2 loops on your hook. Then you're going to yarn over and pull through 2, and that's your first single crochet. You'll notice here that you have this little loop here at the end, and that's exactly what we're looking for. This is going to be a button loop later on in the project to secure your skirt. So now we're going to work 1 single crochet into each chain across, and I'll show you how to do that single crochet stitch one more time. We'll insert our hook into the next chain, yarn over and pull up a loop. Again, you should have 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over and pull through 2, and that's your single crochet completed. And now we're going to repeat that all the way across our chain. At the end of this row, you should have 34 single crochet stitches and that chain 6 loop, buttonhole loop that we're going to be using later. So if you'd like to pause your video and place 1 single crochet into each chain across, I'll meet you back here at the end of the row to show you how to start row 2. So I just finished my last stitch of row 1 and I'm ready to move on to row 2. For row 2, I'm going to yarn over hook and pull through the loop on my hook to create a chain 1, and then I'm going to turn my work. For row 2, you're going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch across. So we're going to insert our hook under those first set of loops, yarn over, pull up a loop, and we're going to finish off our single crochet. And we're going to work 1 stitch into each stitch across. When you get to the end of this row, let me unwind this a little so it's easier for you to see. You're going to have that chain 6 button loop. You're not going to work into that loop. You're going to stop working into that last single crochet of the row. Okay, so we're just going to leave this chain 6 space all on its own. We're not going to work into that. Once you're finished with row 2, you can chain up 1 and single crochet into each stitch across for rows 3 and 4. So rows 2, 3, and 4 are all the same. You're going to chain up 1, turn your work, and place 1 single crochet into each stitch across. So if you'd like to pause your video and do rows 2, 3, and 4, working 1 single crochet into each stitch across, I'll meet you back here when you're ready to start row 5. So I just finished my last stitch of row 4 and I'm ready to start with row 5. Now in row 5, we're going to start establishing our frills. And I've designed this in a way so that you're not having to reattach yarn and have all these extra ends to weave in. So I'm going to show you how I make this skirt with all the same strand of yarn, and it's all one piece. So to start with row 5, we're going to do a chain 3. So we're going to yarn over and pull through 2, 3. That's our chain 3, and we're going to turn our work. And this is going to count as our first stitch. Now for this row, we're going to be working in the front loops only. So if you turn your work and you see those V's at the top of your row, you're going to be working into the loop that's closest to you, and that is your front loop only. So we're going to double crochet increase into the first stitch. Okay, so this is our first stitch here. We're going to yarn over, insert our hook, and pick up that front loop only. We're going to yarn over and pull through the loop. You should have 3 loops on your hook. You're going to yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And that's your first double crochet completed. And to do a double crochet increase, we're going to need 2 double crochet stitches into the first stitch. So we're going to repeat that, what we just did, into the same stitch. So we're going to yarn over, back into the front loop only, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And now that's our double crochet increase completed. And now we're going to double crochet once into the next stitch. And again, we're doing this whole row in the front loop only. So we're going to insert our hook up and under that front loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And that's 1 double crochet. And now in the next stitch, we're going to place 3 double crochets. So again, into that front loop only, we're going to do 3 double crochets into the same stitch. And now we will work 1 double crochet into the next stitch. Now we will work 3 double crochets into the next stitch. And 1 double crochet into the next stitch. We're going to repeat this pattern across the row, working 3 double crochets into the first stitch and 1 double crochet into the next. So if you'd like to pause your video and work that pattern across your row, again, that pattern is 3 double crochets in the first stitch, 1 double crochet into the next. At the end of this row, you should have 68 stitches. So I'm going to pause my video and work on this portion, and then I'll meet you back here when we're ready to start with row 6. So I just finished the last stitch of row 5, and I'm ready to move on to row 6. So for row 6, it's going to start a little differently because we need to get our working yarn back down to the base of these stitches we just created. And to do that, we're going to slip stitch twice around the post of the last stitch. So I'm going to kind of separate this a little bit and hope it's easier for you to see this way. But we're going to take our hook and we're going to wrap it behind the post, yarn over, pull up a loop, and we're going to pull that loop through the loop on our hook. And then we're going to do that a second time. We're going to insert our hook from front to back around that post, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then we're going to pull that loop through the loop on our hook. And then we're going to turn our work. And now what that's done is that those slip stitches have brought us back down to the base of our stitches, and we're able to start with row 6. And to do that, we're going to be working into what is now the front loops, which are technically the back loops of the previous row. So we're going to pick up that loop in the front loop, yarn over, and we're going to single crochet. And we're going to work into all of the unworked loops here, 1 single crochet across. So at the end of this row, you should have 34 single crochet stitches. And I'm just going to pause here and I'm going to show you what this looks like. So now we've got our single crochets, and you can see how the ruffles are sitting behind it. These single crochets will create the body of the skirt. And then when you look at the right side of our fabric, you can see those ruffles stick out quite nicely because of those single crochets in the back. So if you'd like to pause your video and do 1 single crochet into each stitch across, again working in what is now the front loops only of these stitches, I'll meet you back here when you're ready to start the next row. So I just did my last stitch of row 6 and I'm ready to move on to row 7. Now the instructions for row 7 and 8 are the same. So at the end of the instructions, please pause the video and do rows 7 and 8. So to start with our row, we're going to yarn over and chain up 1 and turn our work. And we're going to fold that frill down so it's not in the way of our stitching. And we're just going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch across. But at the end of the row, we're going to join the last stitch to the first stitch with a slip stitch. So I'm going to work my row of single crochets and I'll show you how to do your join in just a moment. So if you'd like to pause your video and do 1 single crochet in each stitch across, I'll meet you back here when we're going to do the join. So I just finished the last stitch of row 7 and I'm ready to join my last stitch to my first stitch with a slip stitch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to straighten my work out and I want that frill to be on the outside, and I'm going to find the first stitch of the row that I did here and I'm going to insert my hook into that stitch. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull the yarn through that stitch and through the loop on my hook. Now that is joining the last stitch to the first stitch with your slip stitch, and I'm going to chain up 1, and in a moment I'm going to turn my work in order to start the next row. But I recommend bringing in a stitch marker at this point and marking your last stitch of the row so that way you're not picking up or dropping any stitches in the subsequent rows. Okay, so now I'm ready to turn my work. And again, the instructions for row 8 are the same as row 7. I'm just going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch around, and then I'll join the last stitch to the first stitch with a slip stitch. So if you'd like to pause your video, I'll meet you back here when we're ready to start with row 9. So I just joined my last stitch to my first stitch for row 8 and I'm ready to move on to row 9. Now row 9 is a repeat of what we did for row 5 and I'm going to show you how to do that once more. So we're going to chain up 3 and turn our work. And now we're going to place a double crochet increase or 2 double crochets into this first stitch. And we're working in the front loop only, again, because we're creating that frill and we want that to sit in the front of the fabric. Okay. And now we're going to place 1 double crochet into the next stitch. And again, we're working in that front loop only. And we're going to repeat this pattern all the way around our piece of 3 double crochets in the front loop only of the first stitch. And 1 double crochet in the front loop only of the next stitch. So you're going to do 3 double crochets in the first stitch, 1 double crochet in the next, and you're going to repeat that all the way around your piece. So if you'd like to pause your video and come back to me when you're ready to move on to the next round, I'll finish mine up and I'll meet you there. So I just finished my last stitch of row 9 and I'm ready to move on to row 10. For row 10, we're going to be repeating the instructions we did for row 6. And we start row 6 by doing those slip stitches around the post of the last stitch. So we're going to take our hook and insert from front to back, yarn over, pull up a loop, and then pull that loop through the loop on our hook. Then we're going to repeat that again a second time. And then we're ready to turn our work. And if you're finding that your yarn is in the way, you're going to have to, when you turn your work, bring that working yarn to the back. And now we are ready to work our next round. Now for me, I have to flip mine inside out because I find that easier to see, and I'm sure you'll find it easier to see here on the camera as well. And we're ready to move on to the next round, which is this row 10. And see, we have those front loops hanging out just like we did before. We're going to be doing exactly what we did before and working 1 single crochet into each of those front loops across. So there's my first one. And there's my second. Once you get your first couple of stitches, I find it's easy then to start working a little faster and bending that frill out of the way so you can just easily pick up that loop and single crochet across. So I just did the last stitch of row 10, and I'm going to join my last stitch to my first stitch with a slip stitch. Then I'm going to chain up 1 and turn my work. Again, I like to use that stitch marker to make sure I'm not picking up or dropping any stitches. And so for rows 11 and 12, they're the same. We're going to chain up 1 and turn our work, and then we're going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch across. And we're going to be joining at the end of our rounds. So if you'd like to pause your video and come back to me when you're ready to start row 13, I'll do rows 11 and 12 in single crochet, and I'll meet you back here. So I just finished the last stitch of row 12, and I've joined my last stitch to my first stitch with a slip stitch, and I'm ready to move on to row 13. Row 13 will be a repeat of row 5, and we're going to chain up 3, and we're going to turn our work to begin our last frill. And so we're going to work 2 double crochets into that first stitch, remembering that that chain 3 does count as your first stitch. Then we're going to place 1 double crochet into the next stitch. And I forgot to mention we are working in the front loop only of this whole row. So again, we're going to repeat the pattern of 3 double crochets in the front loop only of the first stitch and 1 double crochet in the front loop of the second stitch. We're going to repeat that all the way across our piece. So if you'd like to pause your video, I'll meet you back here when we're ready to move on to the next row. So I just finished my last stitch of row 13, and I'm ready to move on to row 14. And we're going to start that again by doing those slip stitches around the post. So we're going to insert our hook from front to back around the post, yarn over, pull up a loop, and pull that loop through the loop on your hook. And we're going to do that a second time. And then we're going to turn our work. And now we're going to fold that frill down, and we're going to find the front loops of the stitches here that we're going to be working into. And we're going to, that first one is always a little tricky because of the slip stitch, but there we go. We've got our, pick up our front loop only. We're going to single crochet, and we're just going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch around, working into that front loop only. When you get to the last stitch, you'll join your last stitch to your first stitch with a slip stitch. You should still have 34 single crochets in this round. So if you'd like to pause your video and meet me back here when you're ready to move on to row 15, I'm going to finish this off and I'll meet you there. So I just finished with row 14 and I'm ready to move on to row 15. To do that, I'm going to chain up 1 and turn my work. And again, I like to use that stitch marker in the last stitch of the previous row. I'm turning my work, and now the instructions for row 15 and 16 are the same. You're going to do that chain 1 and turn, and then you're going to place 1 single crochet into each stitch across. At the end of each row, you'll join your last stitch to the first stitch with a slip stitch. So if you'd like to pause your video and do rows 15 and 16, I'll meet you back here at the end of row 16 to show you how to finish off your skirt. So I just finished my last stitch of row 16, and I'm ready to finish off my skirt. So I'm going to cut my yarn tail, and then I'm just going to pull that yarn all the way through the last stitch. Then at this point you can weave in your ends, and their skirt is, you just finished the bottom of the skirt, so you're just going to turn it up the right way. And this is how your skirt should look. The frills should stick out like this, and it looks really cute on. If you really want to tame them, you can either steam block them while you're doing this motion and pushing the frills down, or you can use a tail and you can add a little stitch here at the ends of each frill to help keep them down. Now, after you've woven in your ends, you'll come back up here to the top of your skirt, and using your sewing needle and thread, you'll take your button and place it on the top of the skirt directly across from your chain 6 space, which will then act as a buttonhole. And that's it. That's how you make this frilly little doll skirt. I hope that you enjoyed making it. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and please consider subscribing to this channel. If you like free crochet patterns, please check out my blog, theloopylamb.com. Thanks so much for watching, friends. Happy hooking, and I'll see you next time.